Welcome, everyone. I am really excited for us to do this topic. It's one that we talk a lot about. We just did a course with HubSpot Academy on data warehousing and HubSpot and how you can leverage reverse ETL. And joining me today to talk about this topic are two of the smartest folks in the space that I know. But I will introduce myself first, and then I'll tell you about our awesome guests, and I'll let them tell you about how smart they are and how much you are very, very lucky to spend time with them, that I'm sure that they will be self-effacing and humble about. But I am Connor. I'm the CEO of Aptitude 8. We are a HubSpot Elite Solutions partner. We help organizations implement, integrate, optimize, and extend the HubSpot platform. And a core way we do that is with data warehousing solutions and reverse ETL solutions and helping organizations sort of unify the data that they've come in. So we're excited today. We're going to share a little bit about what that means, why you should care, how you can do it. We'll talk through some super cool use cases that we've set up for some of the customers that we work with. But I am joined by Alec from Hightouch. And Alec, I'll let you do your own intro on your role at Hightouch and sort of what you know about these topics. And then we'll introduce Rob.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. My name's Alec Haase. I lead product marketing here at Hightouch. Hightouch is a reverse ETL platform, otherwise what we call a data activation platform. You all will get to see the tool, so I won't dive in too much there, but definitely excited to show it to you all and help you all understand how to better utilize your data.
Amazing. Also joined by Rob, who I will let tell you more about what his role is. But Rob is one of the smartest people that I have the luxury of working with in and around the HubSpot universe. And I'm sure he will be humble, but he is a mega genius. And I'm very excited to have him here. And so, Rob, I will let you tell people about what your role is and what you do at HubSpot.
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Connor. Happy to be here. And so my name is Rob Ainslie. I'm a senior manager of solutions architecture at HubSpot. Myself and my team work only with existing clients at HubSpot, but we help organizations understand how they can get more value from the HubSpot platform. Oftentimes that's through understanding the connection of your business processes and use cases and what the technology is capable of. And we help folks imagine what's possible, what that might look like, ultimately with the purpose of helping you drive more business.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. And I'm going to tell you all a little bit about sort of what we're going to cover today. So in terms of what we are going to discuss today, so we're going to start with a little background on data warehouses. We'll talk about the data journey. We'll talk about reverse ETL. I'm going to let Alec introduce the majority of sort of those topics in the background of sort of what the history is, how Hightouch and tools like Hightouch fit in. Rob's going to talk a little bit about the Snowflake data share, which is a functionality from HubSpot and how you can achieve some similar outcomes with Ops Hub Enterprise and connecting direct to Snowflake instances. And then we're going to get into my favorite topic, which is how you can leverage this data for actual GTM use cases. And if you can get your data warehouse information piped down into HubSpot, how you can represent that, what types of things you can achieve. And then at the tail end, we can go into some Q&A as well. So if you do have questions throughout this, you can throw them into that LinkedIn comment section. We will see it. We have some folks that are moderating that as well. And then we'll touch on those things. So feel free to chime in. We love for this to be interactive. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have as we go. So as we jump into it, I'm going to hand it to Alec to tell us a little bit about data warehousing and the history here and how and why Hightouch and reverse ETL exists and matters and all of that cool stuff.
All right. Thanks, Connor. I too am very excited for the end, the GTM section. We have so many cool examples to talk through. But before we get to that, it definitely makes the most sense to kind of start at the beginning here and make sure everyone here understands the data warehouse and what reverse ETL is and kind of how these things come together to then go and power those different use cases. So when we talk about the data warehouses have quickly become central to the way that organizations handle data at scale. The repositories are designed to store vast amounts of data in a structured and organized manner, and they serve as a single source of truth, where data from various operational systems, applications, and sources are collected, transformed, and stored in a way that makes it accessible for analysis across an entire organization. So you may recognize some logos here, but cloud leaders like Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery have all created solutions that make it easier and more accessible than ever for organizations to truly create a single secure repository that stores all of their data. So whether they're just getting started with tracking user events or are running LLMs and other machine learning models to optimize their user experiences, the Cloud Data Warehouse provides that data foundation that can scale and mature over time along with the organization. So traditionally, the focus for data teams has been on moving data from source systems into data warehouses. So common terms here, ETL and ELT, those solutions like Fivetran really emerged to enable organizations to extract, transform, and load data from their many sources. So places like Facebook ads, CRM platforms like HubSpot or web events into their data warehouse. Now, doing so gave them that central hub of data, one that focused on unlocking powerful new analytics for any team to use, given that that data was now finally available in one place. Now, as organizations have matured in their data practices, they've realized that the value of taking actionable insights derived from their data and pushing it back into their operational systems and other tools. So teams began to build manual pipelines to get data back out of the warehouse, but they quickly realized that doing so wasn't scalable. So in summary here, the warehouse emerged as a place to store all of your data centrally. ELT tools, ETL tools got you flexible ways to get the data from your many source systems, and teams could really run with analytics, right? But there was this final mile missing of a seamless way to actually go and activate that data out to your many business tools. And this is really where reverse ETL comes into play. So it offers a scalable and user-friendly solution to reverse the flow of data, allowing organizations to extract data from the data warehouse and send it into their various operational tools and applications. So now the same data that's driving the deep insights can power personalized ads or marketing campaigns. So if you think about a couple examples here, a purchase event that might drive revenue reporting can now be used to create audiences in Facebook, or they can be enriched and sent in as conversion events to optimize campaigns in TikTok. User stats that help product teams understand usage can now be sent to HubSpot to power campaigns like Spotify Wrapped, really powerful email experiences personalized with data, but with minimal effort. So reverse ETL is really that concept of activating data. And here at Hightouch, we've built a platform that offers tailor-made solutions to making data activation easier than ever. So data and marketing teams are now able to store, model, and activate data directly from the data warehouse and are replacing legacy systems like CDPs with this new warehouse-first architecture. So one big call out here is that the process of reverse ETL, data is never stored at rest. So it's simply pulled from your infrastructure and sent directly into your downstream destinations, which is a huge value prop for companies like Chime, from highly regulated industries like fintech, as data doesn't need to be stored in yet another system. It's simply in your warehouse, and then you're picking and choosing the data that you need to go and send it into your downstream tools. So a couple concepts to quickly understand before we jump into Hightouch. So first is a source, and think of a source as the place where your business data is stored, which is usually your data warehouse, but could also be something like Google Sheets. A model is what tells Hightouch what specific data you want to retrieve from the source. So the model is typically created with SQL to define the data that you're interested in. However, you can also use tools like dbt or Looker to create these models with Hightouch. And then a sync, once Hightouch knows what data to read from, thanks to your model, you configure a sync. A sync is like a bridge that manages how data moves from the source to the destination. And it also controls how often that data transfer happens. So you actually schedule your sync. And now a destination, finally, is the tool or service that receives the data. So Hightouch connects with over 200 different destinations. I talked to them a little bit before, Facebook, HubSpot, all these different platforms that allow you to then go and send the data into those tools. So in a nutshell, a source is where data come from. A model is what specific data you want to fetch. A sync is the process of moving data from the source to the destination. And a destination is simply where you want to send that data. And we're going to go through really quick what this actually looks like. So I'll quickly jump through sources and destinations. In this case, a source is just going to be Snowflake, which again is just a data warehouse. So it can be any of your data warehouses. We're going to use Snowflake here. Setting this up is super, super simple. A couple API keys. You can also do this through Partner Connect inside of Snowflake. And then a destination, we're going to hop to the end here, is going to be HubSpot, or again, over 200 different destinations. And again, doing so is very simple with just an auth or an API key, depending on the different destinations. So now we have our source being Snowflake, our destination being HubSpot. Takes maybe a minute if you have the right API keys. So like I said before, we're going to go in and actually define what data we want Hightouch to look at, and that's called a model. So we're going to select our data source being Snowflake, and then I can pick how I want to actually model. I can just select an entire table. I can reference dbt, Looker, Sigma. In this case, I'm just going to use a SQL query. And then I'm just going to pop. Oh, do you have a question?
I was just going to ask you who typically says this is getting configured. Who's kind of the end user that you guys are looking at? Is this exclusive to you have to be a data engineering team, or is it someone in the GTM org could do this piece of it? Like, where do you see the responsibility sit in terms of, hey, we have this data. Here's how we need to grab it. Here's where we want to put it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It definitely depends on the organization. When Hightouch was first created and it really just focused on this reverse ETL concept with SQL, we typically saw data engineers, data analysts, or technical marketers who understood SQL. They would be the ones in here setting up the models. That said, Hightouch has very quickly created new products and interfaces so that marketing teams can do this. So we won't necessarily dive into this one today, but if we have time at the end, we can show what the audience's UI looks like, where instead of creating SQL here to define your model, you're going into a drag and drop editor where you can actually like do an audience build. So you say like people who have this criteria, and did not do this. You know what I mean? A very standard audience UI where that's really where it unlocked activation for marketing teams because you no longer needed to know SQL. That said, like something this simple where it's select star from public.users, like anyone can really do that. Though as these SQL queries get a little bit more complex, you do definitely want to know SQL when you're setting this up.
The only thing I would add there is I think we see a lie get asked all the time, whether it's in the RevOps bootcamp or any of these other things of like where skills sort of sit. And I recommend SQL a lot. And for these types of reasons, there are amazing tools. Hightouch has some of them we can cover at the end in terms of making it really easy to do a lot of this. But for some of those advanced functions, some of that base database functionality, even if you're not in a data team or a data engineer, goes a really long way to do some of this. Also give an AI plug, and ChatGPT is great for, hey, I have this table, I want to get this data. What would my SQL query look like? It'll kick you a usable one most of the time. It's pretty rad. Back to you.
Exactly. No, you're good. So in this case, I commented out the more complex query, but it's just really to show here that you can make any queries that you want, right? So I can join my user table to maybe my pets table. If I want to start to send my pet information down to HubSpot, I can filter where statements where VIP customer might be true. It's really like totally flexible to you, and it's just SQL, right? So we're looking at Snowflake, we're looking at the tables that you want us to look at, and we're pulling that data in to create this model. And in this case, we'll just do something super simple, select star from my user table, right? So this is going to give me an entire table of all of my different users. I have some different identifiers. I might have some different information about them, like lifetime value. Cool. So this looks good. Let's hit continue. I'm going to call this demo _ users. I'm going to pick a primary key, and that's really just saying like each row is unique on, we'll do user ID. I'm going to click finish. Cool. Now my model's been created. And now this model can be used for any different destination. I can create however many syncs I want off of this model. But in this case, we'll just create one. So one sync down into HubSpot. So I'm simply going to set up a sync to HubSpot. And each of our destinations are fully built out and configurable. So for this one, you can send these down as objects, events, or segments. In this case, we're just going to send it down as an object, like as a user object in HubSpot. And then we're going to sync it to an object called contacts. I can then choose how to update the record. So I get some flexibility. And if I want to update, or insert records, we're just going to keep that as upsert. And then I'm able to actually map all my different fields that I want to send down into HubSpot. So I'm going to pick my email column from my Snowflake, and I'm going to map that down into the email field inside of HubSpot. I can then suggest some mappings here. We're going to do first name, gender, last name, user ID. I can add any fields. So anything inside of Snowflake, I can custom map in here. And then we have some advanced settings as well on each destination. So things like associations, and we can also do hashing, or you can set up some things here for like handling records as they leave the query, whether you want them to be removed or leave them as is. There's also advanced settings, but you get the point here. You're just really able to configure how you want that data to pass from Snowflake down into HubSpot.
I'll give a plug for associations here, because I remember when we were working with you guys at the outset prior to that being added in, and then we worked with you guys on getting that added in. I think the associations functionality is one of the pieces of this that I think makes it really best in class, because you can have that data model living somewhere else, and you're not pushing flat data files into HubSpot. You're actually able to insert that, link it to everything, which lets you sort of leverage that data model in that destination, which I think sort of expands that power pretty significantly.
100%. And that is definitely used a ton in HubSpot. And those like advanced settings for each of these destinations is what makes this so powerful. If you think our entire destination catalog of over 200 different destinations all have those advanced settings, like building that stuff in-house, it just doesn't scale. So here you can see, like, I can test a single row where I can see all these different columns, how they actually map and what it's actually sent down, the actual API request. So I'm going to hit cancel there. That was just a test. I'll come into here and then finalize my sync. So I'll just say demo as my description. And then I'm going to want to schedule this. So I can schedule it off of other jobs that are happening. I can do an interval to say, hey, run this once let's do every 1 hour. And then I'm going to click finish. And we can actually run the sync where you can see that Hightouch is querying Snowflake. It's looking for all these different rows, and then it's going to send those rows down into HubSpot so that those users make it down and in. So in this case, you can see I now have all of my different user profiles being sent down into HubSpot with all those different fields that I mapped and where it's now made available to power all the cool use cases that we're going to talk about in a couple minutes here.
Thank you so much, Alec. I think the coolest part of this, right, is why it has some SQL. There's some pieces in there. If you are on an ops team, if you are working with a provider, anyone on the ops side, this is not you need a lot of custom engineering resources. I think one of the best pieces of this is that you can deploy this while having some ops infrastructure and the right sort of technical folks on that side without necessarily needing to have hands-on keyboard dev, which is super, super valuable. So I'm going to hand it to Rob really quickly before we get into some use case stuff. Rob, what happens if I want to go the other way?
Yeah, the traditional way. So we've talked about reverse ETL. Think of this as the standard ETL direction. Right, Alex showed us how to move that data from the data warehouse back to HubSpot or other destinations. But in a lot of organizations, if you're using HubSpot, you are generating data there. You often want to combine and curate that data into Snowflake, into your data warehouse. So you can slice it, dice it, use it in your reporting and business intelligence tools from the warehouse. And in the past, as you were mentioning, it oftentimes takes a development team to build and maintain a costly pipeline to write against the APIs directly. You have data management scripts that pull from the APIs. You have to figure out how to transform and store that data yourself. But HubSpot made it super easy and simple to access all of your HubSpot data in Snowflake via the Snowflake data share connector that's part of Operations Hub Enterprise. This is maybe a little bit hyperbolic, but the tool is like magic. If you've ever built a report in the HubSpot Custom Report Builder, you see all the different behavioral and demographic data, all your objects, all the event data, and you get to pick and choose, I want to see this data associated to this object and build a report that looks like this. In the background, every single data source that you have in that custom report builder can also be mirrored in your Snowflake instance. And it's available to query, join, report against the rest of your data in Snowflake, and it's updated. Some data is updated every 15 minutes, some every day, but you get access to the entirety of your HubSpot data without having to, it's 3 clicks of a button essentially. And then your data engineers and analysts join the data in Snowflake to whatever other data you want. So you can imagine this circular data pathway where your reps and your marketing team are generating data in HubSpot. You instantly have access to that data in Snowflake via the data share. Then you join it, and Hightouch can pull that data and put it back into HubSpot after combining it with your other data sources. I'm going to do a quick little demo of this just to show how simple it is and all the data that's there. So what you haven't seen, I'm showing you Snowflake here. What you haven't seen is the essentially 3 clicks that it takes to get this set up. But once you have access to that, you'll see on my left-hand screen here, I have access to a couple of different tables and schemas and views. Inside of this, I'm going to scroll through this for effect, but we have access to all of the associations, the association definitions, every type of event data. Think your email click, your calls, your interactions with your cookie banners, replying to emails, your custom behavioral event data, access to list memberships, and you get all of your object data as well. So you can see anything that is associated between object records. I'm going to show just a super simple query, similar to how Alec showed us running a select all users. I am running a query just against contacts where the email is my email and showing my couple of properties here. We did 3 clicks to install it. We picked the right warehouse that we wanted to show, and we click run, and we get access to that data. Similar example, but in this case, I am taking a quick look at the contacts that are associated to deals. I have access to showing you the contact ID, the object ID, the association type, and I've already run that query. So we can see all the object IDs, the deal IDs. We can join that to other data if we need to. And then similarly, and I think this is really a fun kicker, we have super easy access to all the event data as well. So I am looking at link clicks in email, and we can see, so this object ID 365, that's my contact ID for my personal contact record in my personal HubSpot instance. And I had a email link click on September to my personal website. We see all the other link clicks that are happening there as well. So just to showcase that we have access to an incredible amount of HubSpot data in Snowflake to then join against all of your other business data that we can better action.
Rob, I don't want to take us down a super long side conversation here, but is there anything that I either can't get doing this, or is either a limitation or something where you'd say that this is more advanced than maybe what we support out of the box?
To my knowledge, I think the only piece of data that exists in HubSpot that is not available here is the new leads object, and we're working on that, to my knowledge. So you literally have access to every piece of HubSpot data. If you're in the report builder and you see that as a data source, it's here for you to query and use elsewhere. So your sales and marketing teams can run their reports in HubSpot and use that data, but then you can join it and put it out into your BI tool using this tool. I don't know if that answered your question.
And something that's so powerful with that is like the raw data coming back. Like we just talked about, obviously Snowflake and the warehouses making it super scalable, but like you can run machine learning models off this. Like it isn't just like a report coming back to Snowflake where it's like clicks today. It is like raw user information that is then available to use for anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So HubSpot to Snowflake data share, it's in Upsell Enterprise. If you're on this and your organization has access to Snowflake and you are not using the data share, let's chat. You absolutely should be. It'll save you time and money. And I think we're going to transition now. So we've covered a bit about the technology side, but let's talk about the real reason we're here. What do we do with that? We're going to transition it over to Connor to talk several use cases that your organization could benefit from when moving that warehouse data back to HubSpot.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So what we're going to talk about is some of my favorite things in the world, which is how you can leverage and activate this data across a whole bunch of different pieces of your GTM team. So if at this point you were like, hey, I know about data warehouse and I already know about the Snowflake stuff, like how can we actually use this? Now is your time to shine. If you came in with a little bit less of that pre-existing knowledge, hopefully we have you educated enough that the rest of this starts to make a lot of sense. If it does not, or if there are elements in here that you have questions as we go through this, throw them into the comments. We would be happy to address them as we go through. So let's start with some sales-centric use cases. And so we have a couple of these examples as we go all the way through, but how can we leverage this data for our organization? So this example that we're going to talk through, and this would be leveraging exactly what Alec had just talked about. And so we see a lot of organizations that store and manage their product data. So this could be usage information. It could be key event information. It could be some of that customer lifecycle data. I'll give you a very tangible example from a customer that we worked with. They have sort of this PLG PLG motion and this freemium model. And there's sort of key events that happen throughout that customer journey when they sign up for a piece of the product. And then we want them to engage in a couple of specific ways. And if they're interacting with specific elements, we want to actually deploy sales engagement against them because they're sort of indicating that they might be more of that enterprisey type of user. And so by mapping this data from the product, which is piping data into Snowflake or a different data warehouse, and we push that back into HubSpot. So in this example, we're using custom behavioral events. So that's a marketing enterprise feature. It allows you to sort of build these custom activities that happen and start to track and manage those inside of your system. You can trigger workflows off of them. You can do really powerful things. But to show you what this looks like, you can build inside of HubSpot this kind of engagement funnel journey off of that data. So by using that PLG data, we can start to model in HubSpot how far did these people get, and we can actually interlace those product events with the sales or the CS events that are happening at the same time. So if we have sort of this freemium journey and that freemium journey moves from entirely product led to having sales assists, we can model that in this actual lifecycle event. And so we can see that conversion path all the way through our GTM journey, whether it starts in product and then it goes into the sales experience, and we can power that and report on that and give the sales and marketing and GTM teams the ability to build that inside of HubSpot, model it and report it inside of HubSpot, and weave that data together.
I saw a really great example of this with a customer that I myself and my team have worked with. It's an AI startup. They offer a freemium plan and an enterprise plan. So obviously they're trying to drive those freemium signups into the enterprise tier licenses. And they're moving the workspace data and the payment tier of that into HubSpot, associated to contacts, associated to companies. And so they're able to build a report like this to show the efficacy of that pathway. And then similarly, transition back to you, Connor, to talk about some of the other things they're able to do in automation.
So while we have this data and we can use it from a reporting perspective, right? So we can start to put a lot of that together. What makes this so powerful with HubSpot is we can then use this data across HubSpot's automation engine. So in this example, we're showing how we're using like a nurture workflow inside of HubSpot. And so what we typically see in organizations where they start to scale up and they start to really look at this PLG journey and their product experience sort of being one with their GTM experience is the technology team, as they've set up sort of this user activation process, has built all of these emails, whether it's in SendGrid or Mailgun or whatever they might be using. And then the GTM team has no access to those and no visibility into those. And so they all start bumping into each other. And so by doing it in this function, we're pushing that data from the data warehouse into HubSpot. And then we're activating that data inside of HubSpot itself using the SaaS nurture workflow and being able to trigger and route and send different communications. But most importantly here, we're taking that data, which lives with the product organization, and we're putting it into the hands of the GTM team, and they can now orchestrate and manage those customer communications, not just from a marketing perspective, but interlacing all of those other GTM teams as well. So we'll get into how this sort of expands to other components. And so we'll leave this up for a second. I won't read all of this to folks, but if you want to watch the recording, we'll have this sent out to folks as well, and you can look through it. But this sort of goes through all of the steps that are happening in that workflow. So you don't have to zoom all the way in and be unclear about what's happening, but you can use all of this functionality with delay steps and with if-then branches to sort of route people in different directions, all off of that product data, which all happens right inside of HubSpot.
The one super cool thing I would point out about this is we've been talking about using custom behavioral events. So if we can send an event completion from Snowflake into Hightouch, into HubSpot, by using that data aspect, an event versus an object record in a workflow, we're able to do something super cool here, which is that delay until. So you can enroll a record and then say, just wait here until this event happens. Yeah. And then the event happens, you push the data through, and the user progresses through the workflow.
That is the perfect tee up to my point, Rob. You can not only send in events, but you can also send in things like synthetic events where like maybe you have a propensity model, right? Where someone reaches a certain propensity. Well, Hightouch can send that in as an event, right? So you can say like propensity reached. So maybe you have someone waiting until a certain churn score has been hit or something like that, right? You can just take all of the signals that are in your warehouse and you get a UI to then kind of like mess around and actually figure out how you want the data to make it in here to make these journeys more powerful.
To make that really tangible for anybody who's not worked with data teams or product teams, and you're like, oh, well, I need this new metric and we have to pipe that in, and can you guys go wire that up to the CRM? And then like that just gets deprioritized for months and months and months and months, and you never get it done. What Alec is describing here is you can do that. Like you can go into Hightouch, you can build that synthetic event, you can pipe it into HubSpot. Now you can power the whole GTM stack off of it without needing to add all of these other components. And I think that the speed and the iterative power that you have when you orchestrate things that way is so strong.
My all-time, and this was honestly one of the reasons why I came to Hightouch. I was a director of data products at a company that was using Hightouch. And like when my data team came to me and said, it's great, I can focus on making data science models and not having to deal with the piping. Like the marketers can just do that, right? So your data teams can focus on what they do best and not have to deal with creating these manual pipelines. The marketers can just go and fly with it.
Awesome. Okay. Next function, reporting. Something we run into and encounter all of the time is people that are saying, hey, we're doing all of our sales reporting out of HubSpot, but it's not matching the reporting that we're looking at in our other systems. And if you're doing any kind of commerce, so there's not an E in front of commerce here intentionally, though this is applicable to e-commerce. If you're doing any type of commerce or transactions and you are storing that transaction data inside of your data warehouse, you can power all of that reporting inside of HubSpot and equip your GTM teams to use it. I think one of the things that we encounter all of the time is that the data that the CFO and the board is looking at is not the data that the sales and the marketing team is looking at, and everyone is misaligned and everyone's frustrated with each other. And it's probably a primary reason that we get engaged with folks is that there is a CEO who's frustrated that no one agrees on what the number is. What if you all had the same number and it was coming from that source data and piped back in, and you can build all of this right in the CRM system itself? So incredibly powerful to be able to action and leverage that information.
And one little bit here. We see this a lot of times in scenarios where the way most people that are using HubSpot think about their transaction data is a deal being closed won. When a deal is closed, you say, great, we have revenue now. Oftentimes there's another layer to that, which is, what terms is it on? How is it spread over time? How might we think if it's recognized or not? So you need to think about the revenue type records, not just the deal record. And oftentimes that is an accounting type problem, not necessarily a CRM problem. So if you're sending the closed deal somewhere, figuring out how you're recognizing revenue, you can pipe that back so you have access to the report in HubSpot, even maybe if not the revenue records themselves live there.
Awesome. So let's go into, and I think we've split these into sales, marketing, and service. But if you're feeling that they're blended together, that is because GTM is a thing, and trying to look at these segmented that much starts to get hard from a silo perspective. But we'll try to divvy them out. So for our first sort of marketing centric example here, we're going to use an example of an insurance organization. So this is an organization that is storing, and there's a lot of people related data where you have policies, you have policy holders, you have people that are covered, you have dependents. And so you have these complex data models that store and manage how your relationships with your customers work. So whether you have nothing to do with insurance, but you manage this multiple constituency data model type of environment, this example is hyper applicable to you. So in your data warehouse, you probably have all of this data structured in a really nice way, but your GTM team probably really struggles because they don't have that data and systems that they can action it and they can use it to power how they're actually going to market. So when we pipe that into HubSpot, and this ties back to that example that Alec gave, where you can create those associations when you push that data into HubSpot. This is an example that is showing how you have your household record and you have this Gladstein household, all the relevant info about this household, but then it's also connecting back to the various contacts and the dependents and the policy holders and any associated policies. And by giving this information and powering it for our GTM team, your service team can have much more intelligent and competent conversations with your customers without leaving the system that they run their service inside of, in this case, which is HubSpot. Your marketing team can segment data and make sure that they're emailing the relevant policyholder and even merge information about dependents into those emails straight from the actual CRM platform and inside of the marketing automation infrastructure itself. And so what you can start to do with this data is do things like upsells. And so with this, you can automate so much inside of HubSpot. So this insurance workflow is showing us how we can actually upsell those insurance policies based on information about the customer and that policy. So in this example, if you have an individual, they have a health insurance plan, but they also have a dependent under 18, maybe you want to start engaging them with conversations about life insurance and relevant policies and products that you might have to that particular audience. And I think, again, the power of this is not, hey, data team, can you put a flag on people that meet this criteria and push it into our CRM? And then we'll grab that flag and we'll build a list off of it. It's actually pushing all of that data and letting you build this engagement structure straight from within HubSpot itself.
You mentioned this in the prep for this, Connor, but we see a similar type of model happen. The multiple constituencies is what you called it. If you're a banking or financial institution, we're maybe a school where you have potentially many bank accounts or children that are students somewhere. That same type of relationship matches this exact same model. To use the banking example, we see this a lot in HubSpot is you have multiple accounts and potentially multiple accounts holders. You need to model that some way where the contacts related to contacts related to accounts. And based on knowledge of the products that we have, we can identify, who might be a good fit for an additional loan or a different savings account. That's a super common use case. Same idea, but different industry, different application.
Yeah, we talk about those at Hightouch as like objects or related objects or models where it's like users to pets, users to accounts, right? And in our space, when we're talking about like CDP versus this like warehouse first approach, well, this is the most flexible approach, right? Like you cannot get more flexible than this, where if you're Snowflake or your Databricks, whatever your warehouse is, if you have all that data there and you have a system that is literally built to handle these from the get-go, then you're not going to run into this later on where you try to now tie these objects later on and you just can't, right? So it's a super flexible way to handle all of these super complex relationships that might sound and look simple, but like when you actually go to implement are actually relatively hard.
I think the thing that this captures that I think I spend a lot of time trying to communicate to people about the difference between different tools and different stacks is I think being able to have the multi-object relationship data model and build that automation and that orchestration off of all of that different data elements is the thing that I think makes having your sales and your marketing and your CRM infrastructure unified so powerful and so incredibly different than having it in a CRM system and then connecting it to something and syncing in a contact and then mapping a contact field and trying to pass that in. Being able to work with all of those objects that are powering your business in one automation system, I think is really where we see HubSpot be incredible. And I think if you have multiple constituencies or you have complex data model engagements, that's an environment where I think HubSpot has a really, really unique approach that is pretty differentiated in terms of the outcomes that you can achieve.
Yeah, whether we're talking data model or not, also, I think we think about complex data models as being, enterprise only or only certain industries. This is applicable to everybody though.
Totally.
You can be a mom and pop shop and you still have to think about the way in which what products are selling to whom and what should they do next. That's a problem that everybody's thinking about. And if you have the right data and the right system, you can take action on it.
The problems that used to be problems of scale are now problems for any scale of organization because every company is a data company and the expectations of the customers that you work with are they want you to engage with them at the same degree of capability that large organizations are capable of engaging them with. And I think that expectation ends up driving how you need to be building and driving your GTM organization. Cool. Okay. I'll talk about this example and I think we're going okay on time, but we may be tight on the end, but we're having so much fun. So I think in this example, we talked a little bit about those CBEs and being able to use those. You can use them across the product organization and you can be putting them into HubSpot, but you can expand that into other pieces. So what we see a lot is organizations that are doing commerce and maybe augmented e-commerce, whether it may be this sort of B2B commerce experience or something to that effect, and being able to have that behavioral event data for cart actions, purchase data, and you can start to trigger and power all of that automation in HubSpot off of those events themselves. So in this example that we're sort of showing here, right, you have sort of what these CTAs are. They're sitting on the site. You can be powering them through that e-commerce experience. Your site doesn't need to be built on HubSpot to do this either. You can integrate it with whatever you're using on that kind of front end. But you can analyze someone's spending across everything that they're doing and then target them with whether it's accessories, it's compatible products, it's other items that might be relevant to that user. Because you have all of that data coming into HubSpot and being stored, you can build lists off of it. You can build segments off of it. You can start to power that in all of your GTM systems natively. And I think the extension of that, as well as Alec talked about at the top end, is piping that into all of your associated ad platforms and everywhere else that you might be engaging with that customer. And I think historically, as we kind of just talked about, that was really in the realm of the biggest, most sophisticated commerce internet retailers that existed. And with a lot of these tools, you can sort of bring that into any element and any level of an organization. And so right inside of HubSpot, you can build some of those lists right off of that data. Rob, I know that you mentioned at the top end before I move on that you had a story relevant to this that I want to give you the opportunity to share if you feel like it.
Absolutely. So I worked with a large hair care brand that was leveraging HubSpot for their e-commerce reporting and messaging, as well as they have a direct-to-salon sales branch. And so they were looking for a system where they could combine the data from both of those lines of business and go-to-market motions. And one of the things that was really helpful for them was adding custom behavioral events for many things, but essentially like every product view, we had the detailed data about what product was viewed by what user. We captured every stage of their cart journey. So from clicking the add to cart button to being in the cart to going to the checkout and shipping page. And then we also leveraged that data, not in a products purchased event. So we initiated an event completion for every purchase, in addition to having that data represented as a standard line item in deal. What this allowed them to do is, if we think way back to the PLG customer journey analytics chart that we showed, is they could build that pathway journey for every event along the way and layer in, is this a person that maybe was buying via e-commerce, but also is a salon sale? Or could just be as simple as who is going from this ad set to interacting with our product quiz. They have a product quiz that recommends what hair care products are right for your type of hair. Then we can see were those successful added to cart, and did they eventually check out? So by leveraging multiple models of data, events, and objects all moving through the pipeline, eventually ending with HubSpot, lets us just do so much more with it.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. I to get into sort of the final big category here, but sort of something that's into this element, is data that maybe is not directly tied to those sales or marketing use cases, but that you can leverage throughout the organization. So an example that we run into a lot is folks in professional services organizations. They're largely, whether they're billing by time and materials or they're just tracking time and data entries and staffing and capacity, and they're trying to get a handle on that, being able to reference and represent that inside of HubSpot allows them to start to weave this data into how they're engaging with customers. So some of this are examples that we at Aptitude actually use in terms of how we power our teams to engage the customers that we serve, which is the information on what are the active projects? What's the budget on those projects? How many hours have been consumed? What's the cost rate? What are the margins? All informs how those teams interact with and engage with the customers that they serve. And so being able to represent that in HubSpot allows you to not only get a view of it, but then you can report on all of this in HubSpot as well. And you can do this whether it's by individual team or it's individual account. We've seen organizations that, especially those that serve, like there's honestly a pretty wild business, but like a cleaning organization that largely serves multi building owners in New York and government entities. And so they don't have a large number of specific account level customers, but all of those account level customers manage dozens or hundreds of buildings or properties. And so being able to represent all of this gives them that kind of account health type of view. You can also start to embed this into company records in HubSpot, which is pretty cool. Some of the new UI customizations, but surfacing this data and exposing it so that as you're engaging with and managing your customers, you're knowing information that's coming from other parts of the business and you're surfacing it right to people where they spend their time. Another element of this is being able to create those scores and start to take elements of your GTM process. And whether you're reporting on it or whether you're actioning that data, you can also start to use it across other HubSpot and CRM platform type of functionality. So this example is you can build sort of scorings, the sort of a take on sort of lead scoring as you might look at it from like a marketing perspective, and leveraging that functionality to power other experiences in the organization. And so you can start to calculate the level of sophistication that a customer has based off of all that CBE data. So you can start to determine how advanced is their usage of the product, how many features have they used, what product tier are they on, how many projects have they created. This is from an example of a customer that we work with that has kind of this self-serve design framework type of product. And so people build different projects, people create and sync all of this data. And what we want to know is how much are they leveraging the product? Because if there's somebody who's starting to activate a lot of these additional features, we probably want to support them a little bit differently, right? Like if they're coming in through our support channel, we want to give them a more sophisticated support experience. So we can use that data inside of our ticket and our service platform to build a workflow and route tickets based on how sophisticated the usage of that customer is. And so now that we know how they're using the application itself, we can determine what level of support should we be providing to that customer. So if they have a high degree of sophistication, we were maybe routing them to senior tier support agents because it's probable that some of the base level elements they have already been able to solve, and we're reducing the friction and frustration they're going to have in engaging with our support team by routing them based on the sophistication, which we're grabbing all from their product usage data. So really tying that GTM structure into the data that we have on those customers. Another example that we run into pretty often is manufacturing organizations. Manufacturing is a super interesting vertical because you get organizations that are actually pretty complicated in terms of the number of SKUs that they manage, the complexity of their business process. They have lead times, they have tons of inputs, they have tons of products and customers and distributors, but generally, they're pretty underserved from a technology perspective. And so what we find works for some of these organizations is to go and integrate and connect to some of their SKU data, because they typically have thousands of inputs and SKUs and elements, and start to bring that back into HubSpot itself, which then allows us to be able to start to route different tickets and start to route support or start to route our sales organization based off of that information. So if we know, for instance, somebody recently had a part, that part has a probability of breakage, or it has sort of different support requirements, or maybe it has consumables. We see this in sort of like medical organizations as well, where they have machines and then they're selling large amounts of consumables. Being able to track how many consumables and what that consumption rate is, and then trigger engagement with that customer based off of how much that they're consuming and how much they're actually doing with that, goes a really, really long way for how you can start to automate all of this. And I think these are examples and I have a Q&A placeholder slide here, and we are very much out of time. This has been so much fun. The only thing that I would sort of add on this, and maybe we'll switch this from Q&A to parting notes. I think if you take anything from this, if you're on the GTM side of an organization and you know that you have some of this data, find a way to get it into your CRM platforms, find a way to get it into the tools that you actually use. None of these examples that we went through, I think all of them can sound very sophisticated and very hard. These are all point and click, non-engineering, non-high degrees of complexity to be able to build and execute and set up straight in your GTM platform. And I think you can do a lot of that. And if you're on the data side and you get a lot of these requests from your GTM organization, and you have this never-ending list of things that people want you to do that's not focusing on what you're tasked with doing, maybe point them in the direction of Hightouch and Reverse ETL and HubSpot and CRM platforms, and help them equip for how they can solve some of these problems. Rob or Alec, I'll let you guys add any parting notes as well before we close out. And while they're doing that, we have a guide for all of this. You can grab it at this link. You can grab it from the QR code. Feel free to do that as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would bring up here is like, although these use cases are the ones that we just went through, they're super powerful and they may seem relatively complex to set up. What's really nice is this whole concept, you can get started one step at a time, right? Like we talked about, you probably have purchase events in your data warehouse. We'll just set up that as a sync, right? Like take it one event at a time, one use case at a time, get used to that data flow, and then you can really build out from there.
If we weren't able, I realize we ran a little bit out of time for questions. If you guys have anything, I know that all of these guys here are happy to talk to you. They have teams behind them that are happy to talk to you. If you're interested in executing any of this, feel free to reach out to me. If you're interested in Hightouch, reach out to Alec. If you're interested in HubSpot stuff, reach out to Rob. We have LinkedIn's here. We have emails here. Please reach out to us and we'd be happy to field your questions in a one-to-one basis, given that we consumed all of our time sharing all of these use cases. But this was awesome. I do a bunch of these. This is one of my favorite ones we've done. Felt super actionable. Really, really good examples. Thank you guys both so much for coming and sharing your insights. It means the world to us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. It's fun.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for coming by. And if you're on the recording, thanks for checking it out. Bye, everybody.